tell your name if you want to introduce yourself, tell your story, how it started.
Sure. My name's Oliver. If you want to find me on YouTube, I'm just starting to put up videos. It's Rolliver. Get it? Rolliver. Oliver. R4LIV3R.
I can
Anyway,
link it.
yeah. Yeah. I don't have any videos up yet. I'm just working on that stuff now. You sort of gave me the idea of getting into it because, as we're going to get into, I've been doing similar to you for about 4 years. So yeah, I was, as we were saying, vegan in my late teenagehood for a solid 2.5 years in different forms. Before that, on and off for about a year and a half. And I mean, I was pretty sick most of my life. Like from 9 months old, I was born jaundiced, and from 9 months old, I had a lot of eczema all over, especially on my arms here. But look at that, next to nothing. Most of my life I've had, like, people thought I was a heroin addict for a long time because it looked like I shot up. It was deep, 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 dry, how do I say, you could say veins almost cut in. Sometimes I would bleed freely. I saw a lot of practitioners, doctors, all that kind of stuff. No one was able to help me. At some point, the doctors gave me cortisone. That made it worse, a lot worse. So I was probably around 12 or 13. I started getting really obsessed with health. I was like, if no one else can help me, then I gotta figure this out myself. And my mother got me the blood type diet book. um, I'm not into that, but luckily I'm blood type O, and it just so happens that the blood type O diet is cut out wheat, dairy, eat more meat, that kind of stuff. So that helped a lot. Like I became kind of functional. I still had eczema and I still didn't feel great, but I lost a lot of weight. I didn't have like horrible allergies that basically stopped me from being able to breathe that night, throughout the night. Like I couldn't sleep through probably from the ages of 5 to 12. I barely slept. Um, and So after that, yeah, I got more and more obsessed because I still had health problems. I felt like I could do things better. It was amazing the difference from going from eating a pretty standard diet. My parents have always tried to feed me well, but I still ate bread and stuff like that. But yeah, going from eating bread and dairy, processed dairy, to not at all was a huge difference. It just opened my mind to the fact that, like, holy shit, normal, like most people aren't in pain all the time. And I've been in pain for years. So it kind of told me, like, if I can feel this good, how much better can I feel? And I still had eczema, all that. So I just kept reading and reading and reading. And as everyone knows, the vegan movement's pretty popular nowadays. So I ended up gravitating towards that, obviously. I think I tried a paleo diet before that, but it was very high protein, low fat. I didn't really understand it as well as I do now. And that really helped for a while, but eventually I just crashed. You know, I felt dehydrated a lot. Couldn't drink enough water, and well, we could talk about water later. But so yeah, I just kept trying things, and the vegan diet seemed to work pretty well on and off, right? Like that's how it is. That's the pattern. At first you feel great, and then you don't feel so great, and because you're sort of in the crowd, you keep trying things, and I think people should try things. You know, as we were talking about before the video, I don't want to hate on veganism. I'm talking about my experience here. So do what you want. I'm just sharing my opinions, and maybe I did veganism wrong. Who the fuck knows, man? But I really gave it my all. And if you ask anyone who knows me, I go 1,000% on anything I do. And I don't mean like overboard. I mean, I try to do it as intelligently as I can. I research, and I talk to people, everything. Um, but yeah, I pushed it for about, as I said, in total 4 years. a bit on and off within the first year and a half. And every time I made changes, it seemed to work well for a little while and then get bad, worse. And over time, during the whole 4 years, overall, it was a general downward trend. The eczema came back in a fury. I think it was, I ended on fruitarianism, right? That's the killer, right, for a lot of people. And I really believed in the raw perspective. I think also just I had a lot of brain fog more and more, so I was getting more intense about it. At first, it just was an experiment, and I think I had a very reasonable approach to it. But I will argue to the idea that maybe some of the foods I was eating, if not the whole diet as a whole, was affecting my brain and didn't make me think clearly. Eventually, I traveled around Canada because I was just sick and tired of being sick and tired. I wanted to do something. I hitchhiked around Canada. I lived on a lot of farms. It's a lot like a Jonas story. I met a lot of natives, and I saw a huge contrast between the reserves and some of the more secluded communities that you don't hear a lot about, and they're very, very closed off for the most part. They live very differently, and they are very different. Like, you see their lives are completely different. Their health is completely different. Their mental clarity is clearly different. Like on the reserves, all their food is paid for by the government, and it's shit food. And when life's easy that way, you take what you can get. Like, if you don't have to work for anything at all, and you don't know better, then you're usually going to go for what's the easiest possible thing. So a lot of these people, they drink too much, they eat crap all day, they're violent, sick. I don't want to hate on them because they're in a terrible situation. I really do feel bad for them. But then I met it was one native elder who, huge guy, man, like probably twice my weight, and he said he was, I think it was late 70s, and he looked good. He looked really good, and he told me about raw meat, like the Jonas Vonderplants. At first, I was like, yeah, I already do a raw diet. I wasn't really seeing the difference between raw fruit and that. But I was on the road, and when you're on the road, you can't just eat fruitarian. It's not easy. It's not easy eating fruitarian in almost any situation unless you're fairly stable or you're in like a fruitarian community. Like in nature, that's literally impossible. You cover that in a lot of your videos, but so eventually I broke down because I was so sick. Once I got back to Montreal, I'm in Canada, Montreal, Quebec. Seems like I go down to the States and a lot of people don't even know what Canada is. It blows my mind. We're the like giant country on top of you, by the way. Like, we're one of the biggest countries in the world, just saying. Yeah, so I eventually tried raw fish because, that's kind of an easy way in. I think it was smoked salmon, and the first bite I took was just out of this world. Like, I heard an old Zen story about a guy who meditated. I'm not saying this is a real story, but meditated on a mountain for 25 years, seeking enlightenment, and then he just gave up. It was like, this is bullshit. Went down to the town, and it was a festival, and there was something, I think it was like butter cake or something, and he took a bite, and he was like, oh, okay, this is enlightenment. That's what it felt like. It was just mental clarity. My eczema calmed down immediately. It came back soon after, but so I sort of started doing like a raw fruitarian and meat diet more and more. I was probably about 20 then. Yeah. And it just started leaning more and more towards the raw fish, the raw meat, and less towards the raw fruit. And like, you know what? I understand people who think raw meat is crazy. Like, we can't deny that there's so much. I don't even want to just say conditioning. There might be some valid concern there, but I was fucking desperate, guys, and at a certain point, you have to try whatever you can. If you're in intense chronic pain and you've tried cooked meat, you've tried everything, like fucking everything. I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on probably close to probably just under about $100,000 over the years on trying different health modalities. And I'm not saying that I've tried everything because there's so much out there, but I've tried a lot, and probably way more than most of you fucking vegans have tried. So go
What
ahead, send
exactly
me
was it? Supplements, or what do you mean?
practitioners with different perspectives and different protocols, testing, labs, all that kind of stuff.
And when you were
Basically,
a vegan, did you eat grains, vegetables, fruit, and the typical stuff?
sometimes, but it didn't take long for me to realize that I felt a lot worse on those.
Hmm.
After a while, I might go through little periods where I would like fall back into the grains, but it was more for maybe social reasons or just because I felt like it, because I felt like the taste, and I sort of forgot what my symptoms were like. Oh, by the way, yeah, I forgot about this. I have a bone sitting here. I thought I would trigger a few vegans. Just have a little bite. I had a big breakfast, so I won't eat much, but just in the spirit of it all, right? Um, so yeah, so I've been doing a similar diet to you for the past 4 years, and I've been trying stuff still because I don't believe in falling in under dogmatic beliefs. I don't believe in conclusions. And I'm still open to the idea that veganism might be the best way, but I am highly skeptical. I am highly, highly skeptical. And I have to go based on my own experience, right? So,
Did you
if
take supplements when you were vegan?
I tried a lot of stuff. I never saw any difference.
Sure.
I'm trying to think of any cases where I saw something. Magnesium felt good. I still occasionally take a little bit of like natural magnesium water. Uh, I'm not big on supplements generally.
What about
I
B12 and all that?
No, I
Okay.
never took B12. The crowds I was in were always like, you don't need it. You don't like, you can synthesize it from the sun.
Oh wow.
And I have seen decent studies about that, but there's nothing saying like that
B12
it's.
from the sun? There's a study about that?
Yeah, I'll try
What?
to find it.
Okay.
Uh, I think there's something to do with chlorophyll and
Uh-huh.
B12, but I don't think it was really significant amounts at all. So yeah, a lot about the whole conversion stuff, with the vegans. Look into it. People do your own research, because if I just start like spouting studies and stuff, sooner or later people are like, no, but this study or that study, but like you don't look into who's funding the studies, how the study was actually done, how, like, what perspective it was looked at. There's so many aspects to this stuff. Ultimately, I'm going based on my experience. I talk to a lot of people. I actually work with a few people. If anyone wants tips or advice, just send me an email. It's the same as we'll link it, I guess.
Sure.
Yeah. And I won't necessarily put you on a raw meat diet. Like, um, there is some variety in humans, in my experience. Again, I don't ultimately know, but I have more experience than most people, and um, I see this diet or similar diets doing by far the most good, by far.
What
Like,
about the health issues you had? You said brain fog, the eczema, what else?
um, I had migraines for a long time. I got gout at some point. Uh, of course, people will blame it on the meat, but every time I've tried to reintroduce fruit into my diet, that's when gouts come back. That and cooked eggs, cooked egg whites. I seem to have a sensitivity to
Do
that.
you know what the end product is of fructose metabolism?
Well, I'm not sure if you're thinking the same thing, but I would say insulin resistance.
Right, no, uric acid.
Yeah, yeah,
Right. So,
exactly.
makes sense.
Yeah. um, yeah. It's just funny because after a while of once you're actually in this stuff, as opposed to reading this stuff online, and you're young, you're healthy, you can basically do any diet and you'll feel pretty good. Um, if you've been sick for a really long time, and you talk to a lot of people who've been really fucking sick for a long, long time, uh, if you've spent over a decade fucking reading about nutrition and testing things on yourself and your friends and other people, it's pretty clear that veganism isn't for everyone. I'll say that. Maybe it's for some people. Maybe it is. Maybe it is for some people in certain cases, because I'm not going to stand here and say I can't really digest plant foods, so you shouldn't. That would be unreasonable. Maybe there's someone who can't digest meat matter. I've never seen a decent case of that before, but it's possible. It comes down to I'm having a real problem here. I'm hearing more and more vegans pushing for almost like the state getting involved with people's meat consumption, stuff like that. And that's where I'm really I felt the need to start doing research. I found you, and I felt that we need to bring this up because like I can debate about morality and shit on a very, very logical level. I've done this before. It's very simple, but ultimately, I'm gonna bring it back to me. And I know I've said this a few times. My experience is I can't eat plant food. So if you tell me that I can't eat meat, and I do get this. Maybe some people are like, oh, no, vegans aren't that intense. They are. Some of them, at least. If you tell me I can't eat meat, that means that I'm not allowed to live in health. So I'm going to fight back. That's basic. That's beyond morality. It's practicality. Morality actually just means what is considered acceptable. So that is very subjective, and people have been debating this as if it was like some divine law, even though they won't attribute it to anything divine. They just say what's okay and what's not okay, and that's an important conversation, I think. But what it does come down to is what allows us to live well as humans, or at least the best we can. And it's impractical if the population needs to eat a certain amount of meat, and then another population comes and tries to impose laws or violently tries to change that. It's very impractical. And it would be impractical if I went out and protested against veganism and tried to make it illegal. That's just fucking stupid. It's about freedom, people. Anyways.
What
Thought I'd bring that
about
up.
vegan friends? And were you in a circle, or did you have anybody?
I've always been a bit of like I think I've been forced to go off on my own path to some degree, but veganism's always been sort of vegetarianism is big here in Montreal. Like there's more and more vegans, but back when I was doing it, I was I guess a little ahead of the curve, especially with the fruitarian stuff. It was mostly online, but nowadays I'm seeing more and more vegans here. I don't fight them on it. I just tell them what I do, and leave it at that. If they have a problem with it, that's that. So when it comes to the circle, no, it was mostly online. Mostly online. Sorry if I go off on tangents here. This is a big topic.
It's fine. You can add whatever you want.
Yeah. Um, yeah, no, that's all I can think of for now.
Yeah, somebody showed me a picture yesterday in Sweden. They're pushing it hard too, and they started selling vegan, quote unquote, ground meat.
Yeah.
Uh,
Just call it whatever it is, you know? Stop saying it's a meat substitute. Just if enjoy your food if you can. Personally, whenever I eat any type of plant food, it's great for a little while, but then I get really bored of it very fast. And then if I'm convinced that I have to eat plant foods, then I'll switch to another one, and then I get bored of that pretty fast. Meat, I never get tired of, ever. And like I forget where it was. I saw a video of some restaurant that had they're like apparently making some of the best meat substitutes, and there was what was it? It was sweet potato based egg substitute and a mushroom bacon. Why don't you just fucking call it sweet potato bullshit and like mushroom whatever or whatever you want to call it? You know, like mushroom sandwich. It was a BLT, right? Why call it mushroom bacon? I don't understand that.
well, the question is who names these foods? Is it the vegans themselves, or are the people who are
Good
making the
question.
money, who have some agenda, something like that?
I would love it if you sent me more research on some more of that, like maybe the vegan agenda type of stuff. The political stuff, I don't know that much about, but I stated my opinion already. It gets political when someone tries to impose those kinds of laws on other people.
Did you see the
The,
documentary I made?
the
Yeah.
NWO diet, yeah,
I'll
yeah,
post
yeah.
more videos about stuff like that.
Cool. Cool. Again,
Well,
I'm always skeptical about all this stuff, but I'm open to all of it. Like even the flat Earth stuff, I don't know.
what was
And
the tipping point when you quit veganism? Like,
well,
was your
it was
health
probably
just messed up?
yeah, yeah. It was getting worse and worse. Like I don't know how my girlfriend at the time fucking handled it. I had bandages around my arms, all over my arms. I probably looked like some fucking Japanese cartoon character or something, just to cover it up so I wouldn't itch it to the point of bleeding. I'm surprised that I'm not covered in scars. I think it's all the raw fat. I think that healed a lot of my scarring. Um, but yeah, it was really intense. It got really bad. I I'm trying to remember like where I first had the first tipping point, like mini tipping point, I would say was meeting that native elder, uh, old turtle. That's what they call them. I don't get the name. Uh,
Would
just
you
kind of hello.
say that you got something out of veganism? Did you learn something?
Oh, I learned a lot. I
Okay.
learned a lot about what not to do, um,
Okay.
and a lot about groupthink, people following certain ideas, and it exists in the carnivore world too, in the paleo world, like of course. But I think I got better at picking it out after the fact. It's looking back at the whole thing that I've learned a lot. Um, one big issue is, you know, extremism is never smart. And I know some people will argue that eating raw meat is extreme, and I agree. I'm not telling anyone to go out and start eating a ton of raw meat, but I went to one extreme with the veganism, and I damaged myself even more than I already was. So I have to a certain degree, go to an opposing extreme to heal. I still eat some plants. I'm very reasonable. That's a very relative term about how I'm doing this, but yeah, um, that's one important topic that it's how have we not learned this yet? Any form of extremism, if you talk about politically, nutritionally, spiritually, it's not a good idea, people. Like fucking Buddha, middle path, guys, to some degree. There's a lot of debate about what that actually is, what balance actually is, but what is extreme is pretty obvious, to me at least. being vegan and telling other people, well, like practically attacking other people for living another way is extremism.
I would call it extreme because it's such a new thing, and if you
That
push people to just do it, even though we have absolutely no history of it, like we have no history of humans only eating plants, and now they push everybody as if it's the best thing ever, even though we have never done it. And that's the crazy part about it.
and well, there are cases where it's happened, but every single time it was during the situation. It was in the context of a large empire where the elite recommended grains as the diet for the masses, as a for the slaves. It was a form of manipulation. And again, maybe that's not legitimate, but you can see it in India, you can see it in Rome, you can see it in Egypt, Sumeria. I think there's a few other examples. Those are the only cases where people were actually vegetarian, and even then they weren't completely vegetarian. I was reading one story as the first white man to be accepted into Tibet. He was, I think, a war. He was British. He was imprisoned in the war in India. He escaped to Tibet, and he was living there with the Tibetans before any white man had been there. And a large part of the population was vegetarian, except for some of the higher priesthood. And these people lived to 30, and they're not violent people. And if someone brings up the argument that people live to 20, 30, 40 through most of history, that's utter bullshit, because the population lifespan numbers are taken based off of child mortality. That's a huge part. I'm not even going to be able to remember all the factors that count into here. There's also, violence, people murdering each other. Now that we have big cities, it's harder for large predators to come and kill us, which was more common back then. So that reduced again, the average lifespan. And probably one of the most important things, most of those numbers come from the dark ages of fucking Europe. When there's disease everywhere, people throwing their shit out on the streets, out the window. I'm sorry, it's just like, it depends where you look. If you look at the numbers, there's less numbers from rural populations, but if you look at the numbers from, say, industrial Britain, in the cities, people didn't live that long. I think it was like 50s, 60s, no, probably even less, 40s, 50s. But then if you looked at the farmers right outside of the city, who lived off of fresh food, what they were producing, and a lot of raw dairy and probably cooked meat, but still fresh and grass-fed. These people were living easy 70, 80, 90 in good shape. There's less numbers, sure, but it's a pretty obvious distinction. And one last point, for the blue zones, I know people who've gone to live in the blue zones. I know one guy who married an Okinawan. They eat fatty meat, guys. They eat fatty meat and fish. Mostly the Okinawans eat lots of pork. The Sardinians, a lot of cheese, a lot of dairy. And it might not all be raw. Sure, that's another debate completely, but let's just start off on that point. That's a pretty big distinction.
Also, raw goat meat in Okinawa.
Yeah? Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. Yeah. It's just amazing once you actually start looking at the details behind a lot of the assumptions out there. It's scary. Also, average lifespan in the West started plummeting about 3 years ago, even despite all of the standards that we've been on. One more factor, counting the whole average lifespan thing. Sure, we live to, what is it nowadays? Is it like, for men, 73, 70, mid-70s? Yeah. On average, the last 10, 20 years of that is people on life support. So they're not healthy for the last 10, 20 years of their life. They're giving everything they got, their pension, their savings away to medical bills, and barely living. So don't tell me that our society is 100% progressive. I think that that perspective is just pure arrogance. Sure, we have some things great nowadays, but man, we have a lot of things wrong too.
There's the people in Lapland, in northern Finland, Sweden, who eat raw meat, reindeer, and they live to hundreds. They run around
Yep,
like kids in the forest, and even in that kind of cold. And there's absolutely no reason to believe that they ever lived any shorter lives because nothing at all has changed there. So
exactly.
that's a very easy way to disprove it.
Uh, if you have any links to this kind of stuff, please send it to me. I'm collecting as much information as possible, and like I think this is an important exercise more people have to look at. Write down all of your assumptions, but especially like within a certain context, like for example nutrition. Everything that you count as true. It takes a while to think about it, but this is a really good exercise, and it's really revealing. And look at where those assumptions come from. What are your sources? What are your references? Where did you hear it? Was it just someone who told you this and when you were 7 and you're like, oh yeah, this person's cool. They're probably right. And start researching it. I'm sure a lot of people don't have time for this kind of stuff, but you know what? It's probably more important than anything you're doing with your life right now for most people. As far as I've seen most people, how they spend their time. And I'm doing this for meat eating as well. Like, I'm trying to challenge my own opinions when it comes to carnivory. I have a list of all the studies, all the arguments, all the debates I've listened to and looked at on both the veganism and carnivory or paleo side. And I'm looking at every argument to each one of those arguments. And I hate to say it, like, okay, vegan gains, man, like, you're a great debater, but you talk a lot about how people aren't experts, but you're everything you quote, you come back to the same studies again and again. Work a little harder, man, because like just the Adventist study, for example, funded by Kellogg's, and I know that that's just one point. I'm not going to get into the whole thing, but start there. That's one big argument against one of the main arguments you have. The whole cholesterol thing, I've seen tons of people's carotid artery x-rays. Clean, squeaky clean on a high-fat, high-meat diet. Better than any vegan's x-rays I've seen. So, again, I might be wrong.
What do you think is the future of veganism? Where is it heading?
Well, I think everyone should, I think we should be free to try what we want to try. And it seems like no matter how bad anything goes, let's just say communism, people keep trying it. But I don't think there is such thing as what is the future. I think it's our individual responsibility to keep fighting for what we think is true or trying to discover what's true or, ultimately balance things out. So I have a hard time with that question. What's the future of veganism? It could become a police state, man. It's possible. If we don't do anything, meat production could become legalized and a small population will revolt against it. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen. As I said, it's just a possibility in the infinite possibilities. What I think would be best is we educate people properly. I know that's not what you're asking, but that's the only answer I can honestly give is we keep educating people properly. Everyone keeps speaking out like we're doing. That's why I love what you're doing is you're balancing things out a bit. Sure, a lot of people think what you talk about is extreme, but what I really enjoy about it, I might not agree with everything you say, and we don't have to get into or we could get into specifics there, but that doesn't really matter. Ultimately, is what you're challenging people's beliefs, and that's really important because as soon as we become arrogant, and we start thinking that we know what's best for other people, and we put that into action, that gets really fucking dangerous. Like that is one of the most recurring patterns in history. So what's the future of veganism? Hopefully, if I have anything to do about it, it's going to be a nice little experiment that people can do for themselves, a little experience. And you know what? Maybe a short-term juice fast after eating crap for 20 years is a really good thing. It wouldn't surprise me. I've seen a lot of interesting studies about that. But long-term militant veganism, if I have anything to say about it, that's not going to be a thing, and it should never be. And same thing with carnivory. I don't know if that's a satisfying answer to you,
Yeah, yeah,
because it
totally.
was off in a different direction, but
Whatever you want to say is fine.
cool. Yeah.
Anything else you want to add, or anything more you want to say to vegans?
Vegans, well, just be open. Just be open, guys. Like, I don't mind if you call raw meat eaters crazy. That's fine. I have no issues there. But basically to everyone, just keep questioning your beliefs. Keep researching, keep testing, and also get off the fucking computers. Go outside, live your life, meet people, talk to people, because a large part of the issue here, it seems to me, is that people are completely divided from their own biology. You can see this reflected in a lot of political movements nowadays. I'm not going to get into those details, but a large part of it, I think, stems from the fact that we're losing our ability to interact with each other. And a major factor when it comes to longevity is being social, or feeling like you have a social purpose. Like actual three-dimensional relationships. Being on the computer a lot can damage your vagus nerve, which is your connection from your brain to your gut. And your gut is your social instinct. It's what allows you to empathize with other people. I like to say vegans relate better to cows and sheep than other humans. A lot of them, they also believe that we're destroying the planet, which is true in some ways, but not in the ways that they think. And they think that we're overpopulating the planet, that we shouldn't have children. It comes down to the fact that a lot of them have damaged fertility, which affects your brain too. It's a whole system here. So it's very multidimensional, but ultimately, get out in the real world, question your beliefs, talk to a lot of people. It really comes down to that. Self-awareness, self-responsibility. Yeah, stop thinking you're so progressive. Doubt yourself a little bit.
Anything else? Any story, anything you experienced, anything interesting?
Well, I'll say it's just unfortunate because no matter what I say at this point, I'm going to be classed in with a group after saying all this stuff. Like I've been saying it again and again and again. Maybe I'm wrong, but it never feels like I can say it enough, because in a conversation nowadays, I'll repeat it over and over again, and people still are like, no, your experience is wrong. Mine is more important than yours. And I'm not denying their experience, but how can we communicate at that point? The only way this can go, if we keep escalating, is like all-out war. And in my experience, vegans aren't very strong. I've gotten a lot stronger, and I work out a lot less now. My muscle mass has gone up big time. All of my health markers have gone up since I've been eating this way. Like I just there's a mountain next to my house. I biked up with my parents recently, it had been the first time in years when I was vegan I biked up almost every day. And I went faster than I did back then. Sure, I was a little, like, out of breath, but, like, how much can I expect? It's been 4 years. Sure, I've done some manual work since then, but Jesus fucking Christ, there's a big difference. If you want war, you're up against something, guys. Yeah. Rational conversation about this kind of stuff is really important.
Thank you.
Thanks, man. Thanks for everything you do.
Yeah. Cool.
Wait, I'm gonna have more bite of this on camera. You don't have anything to eat with me?
I just ate liver. I'm very
Okay.
satiated.
Yeah, man. That's another thing. I forever had a really hard time stopping myself from eating. I just was always hungry. I wasn't full, and since I've been doing keto, it's never been an issue. I don't think about food. I can eat once a day. Usually I eat 3 times a day because I think I have had adrenal burnout, and it's good to. Anyways, won't go into the details, but yeah, I don't think about food. I feel full all the time, and it's a different feeling than your stomach being like overloaded or just like stuffed. It's like your brain telling you you just had a successful hunt and you're good, man. Like it's evolution being like, fuck yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So I hope this helps someone.